Welcome to China Dispatches, the official podcast of the European Union Chamber of Commerce in China. This is your host, Jacob Gunter, the European Chamber's Senior Policy and Communications Manager. Today I'm joined by European President Joerg Wuttke, a longtime resident of China who has had multiple terms as President of the European Chamber. We'll be looking through the last 2 years of the presidential term that he's wrapping up, but also looking at his plans for the next 2 years, as he is currently running unopposed for the presidency. So with that, let's lean into the episode and get started. Joerg, can you introduce yourself to our audience?
Well, I'm one of the founding fathers of the European Chamber. I am one of those that put up with 50 colleagues the Chamber in 2000 and have been president 3 times, and I'm sort of like the fossil. I'm heading a German company here in Beijing, so actually I do have a proper daytime job.
Yeah, I always enjoy the fact that you come and work for us for free as sort of a hobby, but certainly a time-consuming hobby and a busy one. So what we'll do is today we'll be discussing with Joerg sort of the 3 pillars of the chamber, which are what we call the ABC model. A is for advocacy, B, business intelligence, and C is for community. And these are the main things that the chamber tries to advance things on and kind of build a community and advocate the interests of European companies here in China. So first, let's move to advocacy. This is sort of the core function of the chamber, and is one of the reasons it was founded. Joerg, I know this is one of your favorite stories to tell. Why exactly was it that we had a European chamber when initially there was just the German chamber, the Benelux chamber, the Italian chamber, etc.?
Well, in my long experience, in particular with the European Commission in the late 90s, it was clear that during the WTO negotiations, the Trade Commissioner Pascal Lamy wanted to have a meeting with insurance, with banking, with petrochemicals, and he didn't want to meet the Spanish, the Italian, the Danish. He wanted to have basically the industry or service sector focused discussion, and sitting around the table, we found this is a proper setting, and we thought, okay, let's establish something which is complementary to the bilateral chambers, which are more focused on trade relations, trade promotion, and so forth. So advocacy was the starting point for us, and definitely I think we have proven within a very short period of time that we are the voice of Europe, not only towards the governments, but also in the media, trying to make our points clear.
Yeah, certainly. Diving into some of the specifics, what are some of the best chamber advocacy successes that you've seen in the last couple of years, both kind of on the Chinese and the European sides, especially as things have become quite fraught in many ways, and there are a lot of concerning trends?
Well, a big success was also equally a big failure, frankly, last year. The Chamber worked very closely with the Commission and partly also with the Ministry of Commerce here in China on the investment agreement. And with all kinds of headwinds, we actually managed to get this signed in late December. And I thought this was really good. I mean, a baby step in many ways, but I think it was a good deal, deserved to be ratified and implemented. And now, after these outsized sanctions from China on particularly European parliamentarians, it was clear to me this is not going to fly. And we got it on file last week when the European Parliament voted with a huge majority that they will not even look at the agreement unless China lifts the sanctions, which politically is very difficult. So in a way, it's a real pity. We have to move on, and we have to see how we actually lobby for these items that are covered in the investment agreement in order to actually get China in its own interest to cover this. So in a way, the success story, unfortunately, has been shelved. I don't know for how long, maybe another 7 years. But in the meantime, in 2020, it was definitely also our background work on getting expats back, the strong focus we had on teachers, and the kind of trying to help schools to open up again. That's sometimes not really noticed by the public because we do it on a very high level with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in China, and that really worked out. And I would say advocacy always needs a good partner. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to in particular thank His Excellency Ambassador Zhang Ming in Brussels, who has been instrumental in a couple of areas behind the screen. Was a great partnership.
I completely agree. The kind of work that we've done at that high level, in particular getting people back and getting the schools back open, I know that's been a huge boon, and unfortunately the Chamber is not always so great at advertising its own successes. But yeah, I mean, as well, I have a lot of friends that work in these international schools, and they've been grateful to be able to get back to work and kind of keep things moving, keep the international community on life support here. So, looking forward, what is your agenda for pushing our advocacy towards our Chinese stakeholders in particular? Do you plan to kind of alter the course at all from the approach that we've taken for the last couple of years, or is it sort of steady as she goes?
Well, I guess we have set the standards very high over the last years. What really makes a difference is that our voice is being heard. And in particular, it's very important that it's not just Radio Beijing from the European Chamber here, but also that we have our 7 chapters speaking up. So I'm very keen to have this kind of media profile, the kind of engagement in Shenzhen, in Shenyang, and other places. That's really, really important. And I guess we have to strengthen that. We are now getting better in reaching out to the stakeholders in the chapters, but I think we can still do better. Here in Beijing, we had 29 high-level contacts with the Chinese government, meetings that were instrumental in helping us on a couple of advocacy points. And of course, the real beef comes from the working groups, as usual, the soul of the chamber. It's 169 meetings we had on that level. And it was about content. I mean, we had to reply to 89 calls from the Chinese government on legislation coming up, regulatory affairs, and so forth. And it sounds really very odd sometimes. You have, the provisions on the protection of state secrets. Then you have the biosecurity law, the catalog for encouragement foreign investments, cybersecurity. I mean, it's a lot of stuff that the chamber does, and my head off to the working group managers actually being able to facilitate this process and getting the responses back into the Chinese system in time. That's a real commitment from our side. That's what the value is, and that's what actually, I guess, really is highly appreciated in the Chinese government circles.
Yeah, indeed. I'm always blown away by the sheer level of detail that our working groups get down into. I think Joerg, you and I are often quite lucky. We're dealing sort of with the big picture things with our publications, with our media. We have our job is to kind of make a simplified story out of things to make sure that people can understand. And when I go through and I read the meeting minutes, or I attend those meetings and I read the calls for comments, the sheer level of detail and the granular level that they get to is quite impressive. Whether it's the volume-based procurement issues for pharmaceuticals, or it's digging through the data security law, all of these things. I don't know what we would do without that expertise, either from the members themselves, the working group chairs and vice chairs, but also our working group coordinators and managers. Really impressive work all around the last few years. Okay, let's move away from sort of the Chinese side focused advocacy and look to the EU. Of course, we normally would have our annual trip to Brussels. Unfortunately, that isn't happening this year so far. Maybe things will change. I'm a little doubtful, but these are critical stakeholders, both in Brussels and in the capitals of the 27 member states. So how do you envision our outreach might proceed in Brussels and these other capitals and with other stakeholders in Europe?
Yeah, looking back, I'm very happy that before the curtain came down in March, that we managed to have a delegation crisscrossing Brussels, meeting the Parliament, the Commission, and other parties. That was really wonderful, and I really miss this face-to-face, off-the-record talking, which cannot be substituted by online events. But, at the same time, we have to deal with reality and not end up in wishful thinking. So we had, I think, a staggering 28 top-level contacts last year with the European Commission. We had your Council President Michel, we had the President of the Council, we had our kinds of high-level engagement with commissioners. We had the Vice President of the European Parliament, and it was just, I think, a resounding confirmation that we matter to Brussels. We matter to these decision makers back home. It's our voice that makes a difference. And then, of course, you have to put the rubber on the road. That's what the working groups are doing, and they had 71 working group level meetings, from energy to pharmaceuticals to insurance and finance and so forth. I guess that really the Chamber managed to make the best lemonade out of a year of lemons, as you put it, Jacob, in your report. So I'm very proud of this. And I guess we actually gained in stature and in importance because the commissioners and the decision makers could not travel to Beijing. They were even more dependent on our input. And here again, we have this fantastic, very close relationship with the European delegation. I'm very grateful for the advice and the availability of our ambassador, Nicolas Chapuis. And we have a new trade head. Eva Walle is an experienced trade negotiator. Wonderful to have her here, in particular after she spent 4 years in Hong Kong. I think that makes, of course, the transition very, very easy. So in a way, coordination, cooperation is very smooth and very detailed. But again, I think we really need a offline real visit to Brussels. I still hope that after the Olympics next year, maybe end of February, March, we will be able to assemble a good group in order to then have a trip and not end up in quarantine altogether. In Shanghai or anywhere else for 2 weeks. I hope that this will be lifted by then. But let me also add that we have our own ambassador in Brussels. We have our former president, Davide Coccino, as a voice of the chamber. So when we're not around, we actually have someone who's in a position to effectively meet people in Brussels. And that is, I think, invaluable for us. And he's doing this with the typical passion that he has, and he doesn't even charge us, so it makes two already. It's myself and Davide who work the extra hour in order for the Chamber's members to get the voice heard and free of charge.
Yeah, I think I myself have been really impressed by our ability to continue to have, not even continue to have, but to really strengthen our outreach to our stakeholders in Europe despite not being able to go. And yeah, I think a lot of thanks go to, as you said, to Davide for being our man on the ground, and also to some of our colleagues here, in particular Esther, who runs European Affairs. I don't know how she's managed to deal with all the requests and for meetings and for briefings and whatnot. But we certainly have made, as you said, lemonade out of these lemons. So let's move on to business intelligence, our second pillar. I think the Chamber is kind of recognized as sort of a quasi-think tank at this point with all of our publications. And in the last year we had some particularly strong ones from Business Confidence Survey, the position paper, to a specific report about the aviation sector, all the way to our decoupling report with Merix. So how do you evaluate the impact of some of these reports from the last 2 years? But also, what do you see on the horizon?
Well, again, speaking from history, we had established the position paper shortly after we were actually founded. The first one came out 2001, again inspired by the Pascal Lamy initiative. And also it was clearly the flavor of the season. Prime Minister Zhu Ji was very open-minded. China wanted to enter WTO. We actually worked very hard because China was engaging, China was opening up. And that has basically led to these position papers becoming the paper to turn to in Beijing as well as in capitals around the world. Then we have, of course, the customary survey. We actually split that up in 2003, and every year we come up with sort of feeling the pulse of the members, and we do this again June 8th with Charlotte running this in her customary manner. Wonderful presentations over the last year. So I think we're going to get the message across. But I felt very strongly that a two-publication operation is not good enough. So in 2014, when I was heading the chamber for the second time, I managed to inspire and get organized these local position papers because I strongly felt that China as a continent and one message, one 400-page book out of Beijing doesn't really cover reality on the ground. And I'm really blown away by the kind of success this has been. Some chapters had already the third edition. Even smaller chapters like Tianjin and Shenyang had put together a great paper and have lobbied based on that one. It's recognized by the local governments, and that was a major hesitation from the local members. Shall I dare to speak up? And sort of this might come across as complaining. Of course it's complaining, but it's with a recommendation with improvement potential, and this has been really, really good. In 2016, I managed to get basically a third leg out from the national point of view. It was overcapacity, it was Made in China 2025, and that really made headlines around the world. And I felt like we have to come up with third topics outside the ordinary survey and position paper in order to get our voice heard by international stakeholders as well as in Beijing. And so when I became president again in 1999, I came up right away with a paper on social credit system, which was picked up with great curiosity. It's sort of like, what the hell is the chamber complaining about? And it was not a complaint. It was just a wake-up call for our members to see that China is reaching out into each and every operation in a very sophisticated manner. And it now has created an industry in itself. We have so many social credit books and seminars going. So Chamber was first, very proud of that. And then Jacob, you and me, we put together this Belt and Road Initiative paper in January last year. And I'm really proud of this. And I'm proud of this like I'm looking at a little orphan because it didn't really get the media hype that it deserved because of COVID. But I thought it's really nice to show that a big political campaign actually means very little to our members on the ground. We came up with the stories and the recommendations, how we can do this better. And actually, the effect shows now. The impact is clearly in Brussels, not in Beijing, where they're now talking about connectivity, putting more money where the mouth is, putting basically more resources on the ground. It has really translated into something. Took a year, but maybe by Brussels standards, that's already rocket fast. And then, so what do we do on top of that? Decoupling came up. We teamed up with Merix in Berlin, a great organization that has a lot of resources, and that's also something I feel very strongly. The European Chamber, I think most of the public doesn't realize, we are a very small organization. We're punching way above our weight, and in particular when it comes to content, it stretches our resources very thin. So we need outside expertise as well, and sort of marry it with our member-driven data sets, which of course are the real value of these studies. So decoupling came out, was widely discussed, and I think it's a great topic to follow up. Now we have two more up our sleeves. One is difficult to put together, again with outside help. I hope it works out. Some of these items I had in mind last year did not work out, like a 14th five-year plan study. But COP26 in Glasgow, the big one on November 1st, I really hope the Chamber can get a paper out on climate change, Xi Jinping's pledge of carbon neutrality 2060. And then for sure, I really put my head on the block for this one, 11th of December, 20th anniversary of the China's accession to WTO, it's going to be a standard study which our partners in Sweden are working on. So yes, we are a think tank, but we are a think tank that leaves big marks behind, and we put the rubber on the road, and that distinguishes us from other organizations that just publish papers. We actually make them into policy.
Great. So yeah, publications are this important cornerstone of our work, but so is media. And our media profile truly exploded last year. We had a 60+% increase year over year in original media mentions for a total of 1,243. I don't know how we're going to manage to deal with our KPIs on that this year or in the future, but it was truly an extraordinary year for that. So what were some of the biggest issues that the Chamber spoke out on in the last 2 years, and how do you think the Chamber can boost and kind of make use of its improved media profile moving forward?
Well, I guess the high profile in the media is not just only due to the high level of vanity of the president. I think that really has something to do with the content that we come up with, where journalists feel like, if they want to know something about, ask the Chamber, and difficult topics sometimes, like Xinjiang. And we are up there. We are quoted because I think it really makes a difference to be in the public media. We don't just talk to 1,700 members, we talk to millions of people. And that is really in itself invaluable. Who do we talk to? I mean, top 5 is always my thing. It's the big 5. It's Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Reuters, Bloomberg, the ones that actually are being translated and read by the top leadership. So even if we don't meet these people, sometimes we do, actually they read about us, and that's absolutely crucial. I think most people underestimate the fact that actually the Chinese leadership does pay great attention to international media coverage. So we are up there. 74 last year, an absolute record. Again, they wanted to hear our opinion on expats, return on COVID impact, supply chains, and so forth. And that also was recognized on the Chinese side. I mean, half, I would say. It's CGTN had 43 TV interviews with Chamber representatives. And that makes me really proud. It's not just really the president talking. It's in the Business Confidence Survey, for example, our Vice President Charlotte Ruhl, it's our Secretary General, and that's really very good. Also our chapter chairs, we had 2 sessions with the top 5 that basically provided the platform for our former chairs, Paul Sieves in Southwest China, to pop up in the Financial Times, and YF from Tianjin was quoted in New York Times. I mean, that is really something. And I guess we move on this, really showing to public opinion that we are a nationwide chamber and we really matter on the ground as well. CGTN 43 videos, interviews, that does mean that I put up a bed and camp in the TV central tower. It's a lot of TV interviews in the chapters. And again, that's really what we have to get better at, getting the messages straight, reach out there. And again, I mean, we are selling our position paper survey, we do our local position papers, but what I really try to achieve, and I'm not there yet, is the working groups doing press conferences, roundtables where they can be quoted. The best and definitely sticking out is the Aviation Working Group, which came up on the paper last year and did a fantastic press conference. Philippe Bardot was exceptionally good in getting a message out on what kind of constraints the aviation industry is facing here in the recommendations. We had a more low-key IT cybersecurity session with one of our business managers, and that was also in itself valuable, but not good enough yet. So I will push for this one for sure.
Yeah, I think we had a really strong advantage in 2020 because we were sort of the only shop in town in many ways. And as well, we had an extraordinary amount of outreach from media outlets outside of China that we've never really engaged with before. because suddenly everyone's eyes were fixed on China at the start of the year. And as well, since China was kind of going through what would become the pandemic first and then coming out of it first, I think a lot of people were trying to get an idea of what that looked like so that they kind of would know what might be coming their way. So I wouldn't want to say we got lucky, because obviously there's nothing lucky about the pandemic and its impact on our lives, but again, turning a challenge into an opportunity for sure. All right, and lastly, let's move on to community. The Chamber goes beyond just strictly business and advocacy, and I think we've built a really thriving community of members here that I think it's always been important, but it became particularly important in the last year and a half, as the pandemic sort of forced all of us to stay within China, and kind of separating us from a lot of friends and family back home. So, how has that community development proceeded in the last 2 years?
It could have been a disaster last year, because we were all in lockdown, stuffed away somewhere, trying to sort of hang in online. But I think the Chamber were one of the first coming out roaring. I'm so proud of this events team that we have. We have managed to have more than one event every day. We have 430 events in 2020 by a staggering 16,000 attendance. So we can be proud of this. At the same time, it's a very receptive crowd of people. We have, of course, events with high-level officials. We have these 3 major blocks of famous interlocutors. In May last year, for the 20th anniversary, we had the likes of Cecilia Malmström and former Prime Minister Dzurinda from Slovakia, Charlie Barszewski. And then in summer, we tried something to overcome the summer lull with 7 books, definitely also covered by famous people. Former Vice Chancellor Joschka Fischer was one of the moderators that we could sign up free of charge. Martin Wolf from the Financial Times. We had Madeleine Albright. It was a star-studded moderator team that went on and talked to the authors. And then at the end of the year, we had another session with high-profile people going on. So in a way, I think we really managed to occupy that space quite well. And then, of course, for our members, possibly in particular in the chapters, more important is the regular sessions on human resources, taxation, visiting companies. Then, of course, never underestimate the fun factor. We are very good at soccer tournaments. Actually, I don't know if we win, but in organizing, we're definitely number 1. And that goes from Shenyang to Guangzhou, and we have individuals. I just mentioned Vice President Carlo D'Andrea, who is one of those supporters in Shanghai getting this off the ground. He's a goalie, I understand. So great seminars, and again, lots of effort goes into there. And I think really the members should not forget with what little staff we do that. And even though we have little staff, they managed to get pregnant and was out of action for quite a while. We had Laura in Shanghai and Muye here in Beijing that deliver beautiful babies. And I thought this is going to be a problem. This is going to take a dip in our events. And, it was Catalina and Lu Yang and Lexi here did a fantastic job in actually bridging that. Must have been tough going. So community is something where I think we are able to put the rubber on the road, but at the same time, we really rely on the engagement of members. That can improve. I think members realizing that is for them, and hence maybe doing a little bit more contribution on their side for the Chamber would help us a great deal to reach the next level.
Yeah, and to one last point, going hand in hand with this community, because again, I absolutely echo the strength of the community that we've built at the European Chamber and with our members and beyond. But one of the big pressing issues that I know has become a top priority for you and for the rest of our executive committee has been the concern about kind of a potential and/or ongoing exodus of foreigners out of China, despite the fact that we only represent 0.1% of the country's population as of now. There's a lot of concern that continued COVID restrictions are going to kind of permanently damage the foreign community. There are the tax issues that we've discussed previously on the podcast. What role do you think the Chamber can play in trying to maintain that small but very strong and sort of bonded community here in Beijing and Shanghai and elsewhere?
I think it boils down to communications, to make people understand that yes, we all want to localize, and yes, we want to be closer to the action with Chinese nationals on our staff in whatever function, be it CEO or be it clerk. And I guess that most of our members actually succeeded. Some companies, including my own, we have possibly 1% of our staff being foreign nationals. And I guess the big car companies have 1% to 2%. Localization can only go that far. If basically it has become a complete domestic silo, I see a real danger. The first and foremost thing for foreign companies is not just to nationalize or to localize here. It is to get our top-end talents into global operations, really ask them to move on out of the silo of China. Getting uncomfortable maybe in Africa, getting uncomfortable in German headquarters, just trying to understand how we function. And that is definitely vital. That's been hurt by the travel restrictions, but I think first and foremost, utilizing and giving our Chinese nationals the opportunity of developing themselves in international operations is very, very important. Likewise, it has to be also that foreign talents come to China, catch the China bug, are getting acquainted with the speed, the robust development of this market in order to then learn from the market, learn from customers. And if we localize, we are in one silo and the rest of the world is in their own world, I think we're losing out a lot of things. So I'm definitely pleading for better visa conditions. I'm pleading with the Chinese government to understand how important foreign schools are for us, for this exchange, because you cannot, for example, have experts coming in for 3 years and put the kids into a Chinese school. 3 years is learning Chinese, and then maybe you qualify, and then you go back or go to another country. There has to be better platforms, a better landing pad in order to cope with this kind of exchange of know-how. And again, ambassadorship. Chinese nationals working for multinationals in Sweden or in Japan or in Australia are very much familiar of what's going on there, but at the same time, they're also wonderful, live, natural ambassadors of China in those markets, as well as that, of course, if we have Swedes, Swiss, and French coming to China, getting hooked up with this country, and then basically they return as ambassadors of China to Europe or to other places, but at the same time also they are representatives of European culture here. So I see localization to a certain point very, very positively, but there is a breaking point. And we are reaching this breaking point. I think the travel restrictions, the kind of creeping nationalism we see in media, the kind of fall of social standing of China, the soft power of China is eroding very fast. Was 10 years ago 60-70% positive, now 70 to 80% negative. Europe is not there in this kind of unfavorable view on China as is Korea and Japan in their 80s already. But it is worrying me. Less and less young people in Europe want to study Chinese, which is absolutely the wrong thing, given the market of the future is clearly China. So you should actually have more people available that actually can bridge these cultures and sort of be the catalysts of change in both civilizations and cultures. It's not going the right direction, and I really try to get this across also in the chapters. That's why I went from chapter to chapter recently, from one AGM to the next, in order to actually make that a point, is China benefits from having its best people going abroad, and they benefit from having our best people coming here. This human exchange cannot be replaced by online. So I don't know if our voice is being heard there, but I think we have to really also be aware within our members that we have to fight for this. Otherwise, we are facing a communication breakdown.
Yeah, completely agree, Joerg. The kind of people-to-people bonds and ties is perhaps never more necessary, but also I would say has never been this week. Obviously, prior to the late 70s, early 80s, there wasn't really one. So yeah, the potential risks of that are significant, but also frankly within our member companies, because I often hear that the conflict between China operations and headquarters and the lack of kind of cultural bridges between the two will often create not necessarily conflict but misunderstanding, and yeah, that's obviously not good for corporate operations. So more Chinese going abroad, more foreigners coming in, and just more of that interaction as well at different age levels, different skill levels. Yeah, I think that's critically important and perhaps undervalued at the moment, but it'd be a shame if 10 years from now we realize how big of a mistake it was to not do more of that when we could do that. Okay, well, thank you, Joerg, for coming on to our show today. It's always a pleasure. Yeah, it's been an interesting couple of years, to say the least. Looking back on the first 2 years or rather your previous presidential term, and I look forward to seeing what happens in the next two, as again you are running unopposed.
Thank you very much, Jacob. It's a great honor to represent the chamber. It's a great task that I try to fill every day. And again, members have no choice this week in order to find a president. I'm the only person on the ticket, but we have a great response rate on VPs, and I must say across China. This is really heartening. The fact that people feel they want to get engaged in decision making, they want to represent the chamber. We never had so many candidates for positions, be it VPs, be it state representatives, be it on the local boards, and I'm very proud of it. It shows we are vibrant, it shows we matter, and it really shows that people also enjoy the companionship that the chamber offers. So with that, thank you, members, for listening, and definitely thank you very much, Jacob, as you are leaving the chamber, actually going to my native Germany, that it was a great run with you. I'm going to miss you. You have been a great lead pen and a great voice. You always fixed my English. It was highly appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks again to Joerg Wuttke for joining us on this episode, and thanks as well to our listeners. In conclusion, I'd like to also thank Zhang Yicher and Gao Rei, who run everything behind the scenes and make this podcast possible. This has been Jacob Gunter from China Dispatches. Thanks for listening.